I took the job at Clearwater State Forest because my student loans had compounded to the point where minimum payments ate half my paycheck. The ranger position paid $14 an hour with housing included, which meant I could bank most of what I earned over the summer season. The advertisement specified overnight shifts at the northern station, April through September, solo duty with radio contact. I called the number on the posting the same day I saw it. The woman who answered said her name was Warden Moss. She asked if I had experience with wildlife, if I could handle isolation, and if I followed instructions precisely. I told her I'd worked as a camp counselor for 3 summers and had grown up hiking. She made a sound that might have been approval or something else. The northern station requires adherence to specific protocols, she said. Non-negotiable protocols. We've had turnover because people think they know better than the manual. I told her I could follow directions. I'll send the offer packet, she said. Read everything twice before you sign. Orientation is April 12th. Bring sturdy boots and a watch that doesn't need batteries. The packet arrived 4 days later. The salary was exactly what the posting promised. Housing was a cabin 15 yards from the ranger station itself, which turned out to be a 2-room structure with a desk, a radio array, a logbook, and storage for equipment. The map showed Clearwater Forest as 62 square miles of mixed hardwood and pine bisected by the Jackman River and threaded with 23 miles of marked trails. The northern station sat at the forest's uppermost boundary, where state land met private timber holdings. The nearest town was Ridley, population 840, 17 miles south on Route 6. I signed the contract and mailed it back. Orientation took place in a windowless room at the Ridley Municipal Building. Warden Moss was 50-something with gray hair pulled tight and hands that looked used to outdoor work. She placed a 3-ring binder on the table between us. "This is your operations manual," she said. "Memorize it, I'm not exaggerating. Skim it and you won't last 2 weeks." The binder was 2 inches thick. The first section covered standard procedures, trail conditions reports, wildlife sightings, first aid protocols, radio codes, emergency contacts. The second section had a red tab and was titled Station-Specific Operational Requirements. Moss opened to that section. "These requirements are not suggestions," she said. "They're based on 7 years of incident documentation, and they exist because people didn't follow earlier protocols. You'll notice they're more detailed than what you'd find at other stations. That's because this station has unique characteristics." I asked what kind of characteristics. "Migration patterns," she said. "Topography. Jurisdictional boundaries that create complications. You'll understand as you go. For now, I need your word that you'll follow every requirement without modification or interpretation." I gave her my word. She walked me through the basics. My shift ran from 8 in the evening until 6 in the morning, 7 days a week with 1 day off per month. I would perform radio checks at the start and end of shift, log all wildlife sightings with timestamps, conduct 3 perimeter walks at prescribed times, maintain the equipment inventory, and monitor trail camera feeds. If hikers called in distress from the northern quadrants, I would coordinate response with the main ranger office in Ridley. "The cabin has a generator, a propane stove, and a wood stove for backup," Moss said. "Water comes from a cistern filled by runoff. You'll have a satellite phone for emergencies and a handheld radio for routine contact. Cell service doesn't reach the northern station. Internet doesn't either." She flipped to a page marked with a yellow sticky note. "Now we get to the requirements that matter," she said. The binder felt heavy in my hands as Moss slid it across the table. The page header read Northern Station Standing Orders, followed by 14 numbered rules written in dense bureaucratic prose that somehow managed to feel both overspecific and deliberately vague. The first few orders seemed standard enough. Use only the southern door during operational hours. Perform perimeter walks at 10 p.m., 1:30 a.m., and 4:15 a.m. Keep the western window blinds closed between 11 p.m. and 2 a.m. But then came the peculiar ones. Order 4 instructed me to log any wildlife sightings with special attention to deer. If you observe a deer moving in reverse, walking backward rather than forward, do not approach it, it read. Order 5 detailed how to handle trail camera photos, flagging any with multiple subjects between 2 a.m. and 2:17 a.m. as code yellow. Order 6 warned about timber company workers, specifying that legitimate crew jackets displayed a green pine tree over the left breast pocket. Order 9 instructed me not to respond if I heard my own name spoken aloud. I asked Moss about these unusual protocols. Her explanations were smooth and immediate, which should have been reassuring but weren't. The northern door couldn't be used due to old damage to the locking mechanism. The timber company had rebranded last year. The salt was for rodent deterrent. You'll receive an amended list in June, she said. Protocol adjustments based on summer conditions. 2 days later, I drove to the northern station as daylight faded. The access road climbed through dense pine forest, crossed a bridge over the Jackman River, and narrowed to a gravel track ending in a small clearing. The station sat at the northern edge, a brown clapboard rectangle with a peaked roof and narrow porch. 15 yards away stood a smaller cabin. A woman in a ranger uniform sat on the cabin steps smoking a cigarette. "You're the new guy," she said when I pulled in. She introduced herself as Hale, explaining she'd been there since October and was leaving the next day. She led me to the station, which smelled of wood and old coffee. The desk faced east, flanked by filing cabinets. Above it sat a radio array with 3 handsets. The western window had vertical blinds currently open. Behind the desk, the northern door was secured with a sliding bolt and padlock. Hale handed me 6 keys and pointed to the computer. "Trail cam feeds come in here. Passwords on the sticky note. You check every half hour. Most nights you'll see deer, sometimes a bear, sometimes nothing. You log anything unusual." When I asked what counted as unusual, she simply said, "You'll know." She walked me through the equipment and showed me the yellow trail marked with reflective markers nailed to trees. "That's your perimeter," she said. 3 times a night. You take a flashlight and you stick to the trail. Don't wander off. Don't cut through the middle." Back inside, she opened the supply locker. I counted the contents: batteries, first aid kit, road flares, duct tape, blankets, and a nearly full 5-gallon bucket of salt. "Check this at the start of every shift," she said. "If it's below 3/4, tell Moss." When I asked why we needed so much salt, she replied cryptically, "Keeps things out," without elaboration. At 10 minutes to 8, she walked me through the opening radio check. I spoke the script written on a laminated card. "Main office. This is Northern Station. Opening check. Radio nominal, equipment nominal, no traffic. Over." A bored male voice responded. "Northern Station, main office. Copy your check. Quiet night. Over." As Hale prepared to leave, she gave me one final warning. "You're going to hear stuff out here. Animals mostly, but sometimes it sounds like other things. Don't go looking for it. Don't try to figure out what it is. Just write it down and move on." Then she was gone, and I was alone. I spent the first hour reading the operations manual cover to cover. At 9:45, I pulled on my jacket and took a flashlight for my first perimeter walk. The air was cold, stars sharp overhead. I followed the yellow trail, counting markers as I went. 8 markers to a boulder, 5 through a laurel thicket, 6 back to the clearing. 12 minutes total. Inside, I logged the walk and checked the computer. 3 new trail camera photos showed deer and a raccoon. I made coffee and sat at the desk, rereading Order 4 about deer moving in reverse. The order treated it as a real possibility, though deer didn't naturally walk backward. At 1:25 a.m., I began my second perimeter walk. At the boulder, I stopped. Something stood on the far side of the trail, a young buck, 2 points, head turned away. I stood still, watching. Its posture was wrong. Weight shifted back instead of forward. When I took a step closer, the deer took a step backward, not turning or bolting, but deliberately moving backward along the trail. I froze as it continued its backward retreat, melting into the darkness. I waited 30 seconds before continuing my walk, which took 14 minutes this time. Inside, I logged the impossible sighting. 1 deer observed, male, 2 points, exhibiting reverse locomotion. At 2 a.m., I checked the trail cameras. The timestamp rolled over to 2:01, then 2:02. At 2:04, a new photo appeared at Summit Loop, a single deer facing the camera. At 2:06, another photo showed a coyote. At 2:13, a photo from River Bend showed 2 human-shaped figures standing side by side facing the camera. Order 5 flashed in my mind. Verify that images between 2 a.m. and 2:17 a.m. contain only one subject. I flagged the photo with code yellow and noted it in the log. The rest of the night passed quietly. At 4:15, I completed my third perimeter walk. At 6 a.m., I radioed the closing check, then locked the station and walked to the cabin. The interior was basic: a bed, table, propane stove, and wood stove. I heated water for instant oatmeal, ate it standing at the window, then lay down on the bed without undressing, my mind filled with backward-walking deer and mysterious figures on trail cameras. I slept until 2 in the afternoon. The next shift started the same way. Radio check, equipment inventory, salt level verification. The bucket was still nearly full. I checked the computer for accumulated daytime photos. Hikers on Summit Loop, a family with 2 kids. A black bear at North Trail, moving away from the camera. 3 separate deer at various locations, all moving forward. At 10 p.m., I walked the yellow trail. No animals, no anomalies. 13 minutes. At 11 p.m., I closed the western blinds. At 1:30 a.m., I walked the perimeter again. 12 minutes. A owl called from somewhere overhead. 3 low hoots. At 2:15 a.m., I was at the desk reviewing trail camera photos when I heard something outside. Footsteps. Not the soft pad of a deer or the rustle of smaller animals, but the deliberate crunch of boots on gravel. I froze and listened. The footsteps circled the station, moving from the southern side to the eastern side, passing near the cabin, continuing north. I stood and moved to the window, pulling the blinds aside slightly. The footsteps continued, steady and even, moving around the northern side of the station, now out of my line of sight. I counted. 20 paces along the northern wall. Then the footsteps turned the corner and continued along the western side. They passed the western window. I couldn't see anyone. The footsteps completed the circle, returning to the southern side, then stopped. I waited. 30 seconds. A minute. The southern door handle rattled. I crossed the room in 2 strides and looked through the door's small window. The porch was empty. No person, no animal, nothing. The handle rattled again, a quick testing motion, then stopped. I stepped back from the door. Order 7 said, "Do not sleep in the station." It didn't say anything about staying inside if something was testing the door. The footsteps resumed, circling the station again. North, east, south, west. Same pace, same rhythm. They completed 1 full circuit, then another, then a third. On the 4th circuit, they stopped at the northern door. I heard the metallic scrape of the bolt being tested. The padlock rattled against the hasp. Then silence. I waited 5 minutes before I moved to the desk and logged it. Arrow 247. Footsteps circling station, 4 complete circuits. No visual confirmation of source. Southern door handle and northern door bolt both tested, no entry achieved. At 4:15, I did the final perimeter walk. The yellow trail was empty and still, 13 minutes. At 6 a.m., I closed out the shift and radioed the main office. The voice on the other end asked if I had any incidents to report. I told him about the footsteps. "Copy that," he said. "Noted." That was all. I slept through the afternoon again, woke at dusk, made coffee, and drove into Ridley to buy groceries. The town had a general store, a gas station, a diner, and a post office. I bought bread, canned soup, coffee, and batteries. The woman at the register was maybe 60 with reading glasses on a chain. "You're the new ranger," she said. I asked how she knew. "Small town," she said. "Word gets around. You staying for the summer?" I told her that was the plan. "Hail lasted 7 months," she said. "That's longer than most. You seem like you can follow directions." I asked what she meant. "Nothing," she said. She bagged my groceries. "Just make sure you do." I drove back to the station and started my shift at 8 p.m. The pattern held for the next 6 nights. Perimeter walks at the prescribed times, usually 12 to 14 minutes. Trail camera photos every 30 minutes, mostly deer and small mammals. Once, a bear. Twice, nothing. On the 4th night, I heard the footsteps again. Same pattern. 4 circuits. Testing the southern handle, testing the northern bolt. I logged it and continued my shift. On the 5th night, the western blinds wouldn't stay closed. I pulled the cord at 11 p.m. and they rattled shut, but at 11:20 I looked up and they were open again. I closed them. At 11:40 they were open. I closed them a 3rd time, and this time I wedged a chair against the cord to hold it in place. The blinds stayed shut until 2 a.m., when I opened them myself. On the 6th night, I found the northern door unbolted. I discovered it during the opening equipment check. The padlock was still in place, shackles secured through the hasp, but the bolt itself had been slid open. I stared at it for 10 seconds, then stepped back and picked up the radio. "Main office, this is Northern Station. I have a situation." "Over." The bored male voice came back. "Go ahead, Northern." "The northern door is unbolted. The padlock is secure, but the bolt is open. I found it this way at the start of shift. Over." A pause. "Copy. Stand by." I waited. 2 minutes, 3. The radio crackled. A different voice this time. "Warden Moss." "Northern Station, this is Warden Moss. Confirm your report. Over." "Confirmed. Northern door, bolt is open, padlock is closed. I did not open it. Over." "Copy. Do not secure the bolt. Do not open the door. Continue normal operations and report at the end of your shift. Over." "Copy. Northern Station clear." I hung up the handset and looked at the door. The bolt was a simple sliding bar, heavy steel, mounted on the inside. Someone or something had opened it from inside the station while the padlock on the outside remained secure. I logged it, then sat at the desk and tried to focus on the computer. At 10 p.m., I walked the perimeter. 13 minutes, no anomalies. At 11 p.m., I closed the western blinds. At 1:15 a.m., the radio crackled on a channel I didn't recognize. Not Channel 4, not Channel 9. A voice, low and distorted by static. "Northern Station." I looked at the base unit. Channel 6. The voice repeated, "Northern Station. Order 8. Broadcasts on other channels may occur overnight. You are not required to respond to traffic on channels other than 4 and 9. I didn't respond. I logged the time and the channel and went back to the computer. At 1:30, I walked the perimeter. 14 minutes. A fox crossed the trail ahead of me, moving quickly, ears flat. It didn't look back. At 2 a.m., I opened the western blinds and checked the trail camera interface. Photos came in steadily, all within the normal range. At 2:08, a photo from Summit Loop. One subject, a deer facing away from the camera. At 2:12, a photo from North Trail. One subject. something low and dark that might have been a bear cub or a large raccoon. At 2:16, a photo from River Bend. 2 subjects, human-shaped, standing exactly as they had in the previous code yellow photo. I flagged it and logged it. At 4:15, I walked the perimeter for the 3rd time. 12 minutes. No wildlife. At 6 a.m., I radioed the closing check and mentioned the unbolted door, the radio transmission on Channel 6, and the second code yellow photo. The voice on the other end acknowledged and told me Warden Moss would follow up. She called on the satellite phone at 3 in the afternoon while I was making coffee. "You did everything correctly last night," she said. "The northern door situation is something we've seen before. Leave the bolt as you found it. Don't touch it, don't lock it. I'll send someone to inspect it next week." I asked what had caused it. "Settling," she said. "Old building, wood expands and contracts. Sometimes the bolt shifts on its own." I didn't believe her, but I said okay. "The photos you flagged," she said. "Have you seen any other subjects in the forest? People on foot, vehicles, anything that doesn't belong?" I told her no. "Good," she said. "Keep logging them. The code yellow protocol exists because we get false positives from the cameras sometimes. Shadows, reflections, and things that look like people but aren't." I asked what they actually were. "Artifacts," she said. "Just artifacts." She hung up. I worked the next 5 shifts without incident. The northern door bolt stayed open. The western blinds stayed closed when I shut them. Trail camera photos came through clean. No code yellow flags. No footsteps. No radio transmissions on other channels. On the 6th night, I was sitting at the desk at 11:30 p.m. when I heard a knock on the southern door. 3 measured knocks, evenly spaced. I stood and crossed to the door, looking through the small window. A man stood on the porch in a dark jacket. He knocked again. I opened the door halfway. "Help you?" I said. He was maybe 40 with a lined face and muddy boots. His jacket had a logo over the right breast pocket, a pine tree, dark blue, over the name Patterson Timber, Order 6. Legitimate crew jackets display a green pine tree over the left breast pocket. "Got turned around on the access road," the man said. "GPS is useless up here. Can you point me toward the highway?" I kept my hand on the door. "South on the access road, 17 miles to Route 6, I said. "Can't miss it." He smiled. "Appreciate it. Long night." "Yeah," I said. He turned and walked off the porch, footsteps crunching on gravel. I watched until he disappeared into the trees, then closed and locked the door. I logged it. 2334, individual at southern door requesting directions. Identified as timber company staff, but jacket emblem incorrect per Order 6. Did not engage in extended conversation. Individual departed south on access road. I sat at the desk and waited. At midnight, the computer chimed with a new trail camera photo. North Trail, 1 subject, human-shaped, standing in the center of the frame facing the camera. Too dark to see details. Timestamp 23:51. I flagged it code yellow. At 1:30, I walked the perimeter. The yellow trail was empty. 12 minutes. At 2 a.m., I opened the western blinds and checked the trail camera photos. Nothing during the 2 a.m. to 2:17 window. I leaned back in the chair and closed my eyes for just a moment. I woke to the sound of my own name. "Hey." My eyes opened. The station was dark except for the glow of the computer screen. The clock on the wall read 3:22 a.m. "Hey!" The voice was outside near the western window. Male, young, familiar in a way I couldn't place. "You awake?" I stood slowly, not making a sound, and moved to the window. The blinds were open. I looked out at the fire access road. No one there. "Come on, I know you're in there." The voice was directly on the other side of the glass now, inches away, but there was no one standing outside the window. The road was empty. Order 9. If you hear your own name spoken aloud, do not respond. I stepped back from the window and returned to the desk. I logged the time and the event. 03:22. Vocalization outside western window, male voice, use station occupant's name. No visual confirmation of source. Did not respond. The voice didn't call again. At 4:15, I walked the perimeter. The yellow trail felt longer this time. The distances between markers stretched. I counted paces between reflectors and came up with numbers that didn't match my previous walks. 17 paces between the first and second markers, 23 paces between the third and fourth. I kept walking. 16 minutes. I logged it. 04:31, perimeter walk 3 complete. Yellow trail, 16 minutes. Discrepancy noted, no wildlife observed. At 6 a.m., I closed out the shift. The voice on the radio asked if everything was okay. I said yes and signed off. I slept badly that afternoon, waking every hour to check the time, convinced I'd overslept and missed my shift. At 7 p.m., I showered in the cabin's small bathroom and dressed in clean clothes. At 8 p.m., I opened the station and started the radio check. While I was inventorying the supply locker, I noticed the salt bucket. It was half full. I knelt and looked closer. The salt level had been at 90% 2 nights ago. Now it was at 50%. I radioed the main office. Main office, Northern Station. Salt level in supply locker is at 50%, requesting resupply over. The voice acknowledged and said someone would deliver more salt within 48 hours. I poured a line of salt across the threshold of the southern door, then another across the threshold of the northern door, working carefully to make the lines continuous and approximately 1 inch wide. When I finished, I washed my hands and sat at the desk. The shift proceeded normally until 11:40 p.m. when the lights went out. Not gradually. Not a flicker. One moment the station was lit by the overhead bulbs, and the next it was completely dark except for the computer screen's glow. I stood and felt my way to the flashlight charging station, grabbed one, and clicked it on. The beam showed everything exactly as it had been. Desk, filing cabinets, radio array, windows, doors. I checked the breaker box mounted near the southern door. All breakers were in the on position. I went outside to check the generator shed. The generator was running, fuel gauge showing 3/4 full, output normal. I went back inside, still dark. I tried the light switches, nothing. I sat at the desk with the flashlight propped against a filing cabinet and continued the shift. The computer stayed on, powered by its battery backup. The radio array had its own battery system. I could still do my job. At 1:30, I walked the perimeter by flashlight. The yellow trail markers reflected brightly. 13 minutes, no anomalies. At 2 a.m., I checked the trail camera photos. River Bend, 2:03 timestamp. 2 subjects, human-shaped, closer to the camera this time, details starting to resolve. Both figures wore dark clothing. Both stood motionless. I couldn't see faces. I flagged it code yellow and continued. At 2:30, the lights came back on. I was sitting at the desk when the overhead bulbs flickered once and resumed full brightness. I checked the computer, the radio, the clock, everything nominal. I logged the outage, 23:41 to 02:31, complete loss of station lighting. Generator operational, breakers nominal, lights restored without intervention. At 4:15, I walked the perimeter, 12 minutes. At 6 a.m., I closed out and radioed the main office. I mentioned the power outage. The voice said he'd make a note. The salt delivery came the next afternoon. A park service truck pulled into the clearing at 2 p.m. and a man in a ranger uniform got out. He was older than me, maybe 50, with a gray beard and a neutral expression. "You're the new guy," he said. I said yes. He pulled a 5-gallon bucket of salt from the truck bed and carried it to the station. I opened the door and he set the bucket next to the existing one. "Warden Moss said you're going through it faster than usual," he said. I told him I was just following the protocol. "Right," he said. He looked at the salt lines on the thresholds. "You know what the salt is for?" I said. "Rodent deterrent." "Sure," he said. "Rodents." He left without saying anything else. I combined the new salt with the old, bringing the level back to 90%, then refilled the threshold lines. That night I heard the footsteps again. 4 circuits around the station starting at 2:15 a.m. This time, when they reached the northern door, I heard the bolt slide shut. I stood and crossed the room. The bolt was now in the closed position, fully seated in its bracket. The padlock was still in place. I radioed the main office on Channel 4. "Main office, northern station, the northern door bolt just closed on its own." I heard it happen. "Over." A long pause. "Northern, main office. Copy your report. Warden Moss will be advised. Continue normal operations. Over." "Copy, northern clear." I logged it and sat back down. The footsteps didn't return. At 4:15 I walked the perimeter. 15 minutes this time, and I couldn't account for the delay. The trail felt the same. The markers were in the right places, but my watch insisted 15 minutes had passed. The next morning, I found an envelope taped to the southern door. My name was written on the front in neat block letters. Inside was a single sheet of paper with a typed addendum to the standing orders. "Amendment to Northern Station Standing Orders, effective immediately 15. Between the hours of 8 p.m. and 6 a.m., the station must maintain at least one active light source at all times. If the overhead lights fail, use battery-powered lanterns or flashlights. Do not operate the station in complete darkness for longer than 5 minutes. 16. During perimeter walks, count the yellow trail markers as you pass them. The complete loop contains 19 markers. If you count fewer than 19 or more than 19, return to the station immediately and report the discrepancy. 17. The salt lines on door thresholds must be maintained continuously. If a line is disrupted, repair it immediately before continuing other tasks. Check threshold lines at the start of each shift and after each perimeter walk. 18. If you observe lights in the forest that remain stationary for longer than 5 minutes, note their bearing from the station using the compass mounted on the desk. Report all bearings in your end-of-shift log. Do not go outside to investigate stationary lights. 19. Personal items should remain in the cabin. Do not bring photographs, letters, or other sentimental objects into the station during your shift. If you find such objects in the station that you did not place there, do not touch them. Radio the main office immediately. 20. Trail camera photos flagged code yellow should be reviewed carefully before logging. Verify that flagged subjects are not park staff, hikers, or timber company personnel. If you cannot positively rule out human presence, escalate to code red and contact Warden Moss directly using the satellite phone. I read the amendments twice, then taped the sheet into the operations manual next to the original standing orders. That night, I began the shift by counting the salt levels, 80%, checking the threshold lines, intact, and counting the battery-powered lanterns in the supply locker, 4 all charged. At 10 p.m., I walked the perimeter and counted markers, 1, 2, 3, 4. I kept count all the way around. 19 markers, 13 minutes. At 11 p.m., I closed the western blinds. At midnight, I was reviewing trail camera photos when I heard a sound outside the eastern wall. Scratching like something dragging claws across the clapboard siding. It moved slowly from the southeastern corner toward the northeastern corner, then stopped. I logged it. 00 Zawar, scratching sound on eastern exterior wall, Duration approximately 30 seconds. No visual confirmation. The scratching resumed at 12:20, same pattern, southeast to northeast. It stopped directly behind the desk. At 1:30, I walked the perimeter. I counted markers carefully. 19, 14 minutes. When I returned to the station, the salt line across the southern door threshold was broken, a gap approximately 6 inches wide, as if something had scraped it aside. I looked at the porch, no footprints, no tracks. I refilled the gap from the bucket, making sure the line was continuous again, then logged it. 0147 southern threshold salt line disrupted, gap 6 inches, line repaired. At 2 a.m., I opened the western blinds and checked the trail cameras. Photos came through cleanly until 2:14 when River Bend triggered. 2 subjects again, human-shaped, now close enough that I could see they were wearing identical dark jackets and pants. They stood shoulder to shoulder facing the camera. Their posture was wrong, too still, too straight, weight distributed evenly in a way that real people standing casually wouldn't maintain. I looked at the image for a full minute, trying to decide if they could be hikers. Lost hikers, maybe, who'd wandered into the frame. But hikers would move. Hikers would show some variation in stance. These figures looked like they'd been placed there. I flagged it code yellow and made a note to consider escalation at the end of the shift. At 3 a.m., I heard a voice on Channel 6 again. Northern. I looked at the radio. The base unit showed Channel 6 active. Northern, do you copy? The voice was different from the last time. Female, young, distorted by static. I didn't respond. I noted the time and channel in the log. We need you to open the northern door. Order 8. Do not respond to traffic on channels other than 4 and 9. I logged it and turned the radio volume down. At 4:15, I walked the perimeter. I counted markers as I went. 1 through 9, normal. At the 10th marker, I stopped. There was a 21st marker nailed to a tree 15 feet off the trail, deeper into the woods. Yellow reflective diamond identical to the others. I stared at it, then looked back at the trail. Marker 10 was directly ahead of me in the right place. I continued the loop, counting. 11, 12, 13. At marker 19, I completed the circuit and returned to the station. 14 minutes. I logged it. 0429, perimeter walk 3 complete, 19 markers on trail. 1 additional marker observed off trail west side between markers 9 and 10. Did not investigate. At 6 a.m., I radioed the closing check. I told the voice about the code yellow photo and asked if it should be escalated to code red. He said he'd check with Warden Moss and get back to me. She called on the satellite phone at 4 that afternoon. The photo from last night, she said. Can you describe what you saw? I told her 2 figures, human-shaped, dark clothing, stationary, too still. Could they be timber company personnel? She asked. I told her the camera was at River Bend, which was 3 miles from any active logging zone. Could they be hikers? I told her they didn't look like hikers. They looked like they were standing guard. A pause. Don't escalate yet, she said. But if you see the same subjects in 3 or more consecutive photos during the 2 a.m. window, escalate immediately. Understood? I said yes. The extra trail marker you reported, she said. Don't investigate it, don't go near it. It'll be removed in the next few days. She hung up. I worked the next 3 shifts watching for patterns. The trail camera photos showed the 2 figures at River Bend twice more, always during the 2 a.m. to 2:17 window, always in the same configuration. On the 3rd night, I called Warden Moss on the satellite phone at 2:30 a.m. This is an escalation, I said. Code red. River Bend camera has shown the same 2 subjects for 3 consecutive shifts during the restricted window. They haven't moved. They're just standing there. I'll send someone to check River Bend tomorrow, she said. In the meantime, do not go to that location yourself. Understood? I said yes. If those subjects appear at a different camera location, call me immediately, she said. Otherwise, continue normal operations. The next afternoon, 2 rangers in a Park Service truck drove up the access road and continued past the station toward the trails. I watched from the cabin window. They returned 3 hours later and stopped at the station. I walked over. The older one, the same ranger who delivered the salt, got out. "We checked River Bend," he said. "There's nothing there. No people, no tracks, no signs of activity." I asked about the trail camera. "Camera's fine. We reviewed the stored images. Lots of deer, 1 bear, no people." I asked if he'd checked the timestamps. "Yeah," he said. "Nothing between 2 and 2:17 for the last week." I told him I'd flagged 3 photos. "Your flags don't show in the stored data," he said. "Maybe a computer glitch. Warden Moss said to keep logging what you see, but don't worry about River Bend, it's clear." They drove away. That night I checked the trail camera interface at 2 a.m. Photos came through normally. At 2:08, River Bend triggered. 2 subjects, closer now, details fully resolved. They were wearing ranger uniforms, dark jackets with Park Service patches. Both had their heads tilted at the same slight angle, both staring directly at the camera. I couldn't see their faces clearly, but I could see enough to know they weren't anyone I recognized. I picked up the satellite phone and called Moss. "River Bend again," I said. 2 subjects in ranger uniforms. This is the 4th consecutive appearance. "I'm looking at the River Bend feed right now," she said. "I don't see anyone." I looked at my screen. The photo was still there, timestamp 2:08 a.m. "It's on my screen," I said. "Timestamp 2:08. "My feed shows a blank frame at 2:08, she said. "No motion detected. Are you sure you're looking at River Bend?" I checked the camera label. River Bend. "I'm sure," I said. A long pause. "Screenshot it," she said. "Send it to the main office email tomorrow during daylight hours. I need to see what you're seeing." She hung up. I took a screenshot of the photo, saved it to the desktop, then continued reviewing the feed. No more photos until 2:20. At 4:15, I walked the perimeter. I counted markers, 19. But when I reached the station and checked my watch, 18 minutes had passed. I logged it. 04:33, perimeter walk 3 complete, 19 markers counted. Walk duration 18 minutes, cause of delay unknown. At 6 a.m., I closed out the shift. During the day, I drove into Ridley and used the library's public computer to email the screenshot to the main office address Moss had given me. The file uploaded and sent. I drove back to the station and slept. When I woke at 6 p.m., there was a new envelope taped to the southern door. Amendment to Northern Station Standing Orders. Effective immediately. 21. Perimeter walks that exceed 15 minutes should be noted in the log but do not require additional action unless the duration exceeds 20 minutes. If a walk exceeds 20 minutes, return to the station and perform a radio check on Channel 4 before resuming other duties. 22. Trail camera photos that differ from the main office feed are considered anomalies. Continue to log these photos, but do not assume they represent actual physical presence. The cameras use motion detection algorithms that occasionally produce artifacts. 23. Between the hours of 2 a.m. and 4 a.m., do not look directly at the northern door. If you need to verify its security status, check it before 2 a.m. or after 4 a.m. If you hear sounds coming from the northern door during this window, do not investigate. 24. The compass on the desk is calibrated for this location. Use it to determine bearings for any anomalous lights. When reporting bearings, use degrees, 0 through 359 rather than cardinal directions. 25. If you observe any person or animal on the station grounds that appears to be injured or in distress, do not approach them during your shift. Note their location and condition in your log and report it at the end of your shift. The main office will dispatch appropriate personnel during daylight hours. I read the amendments and taped them into the manual. Amendment 23 made me stare at the northern door for a long minute before I started my shift. The bolt was closed, the padlock was secure. At 8 p.m., I began the radio check. At 10 p.m., I walked the perimeter. 19 markers, 14 minutes. At midnight, while I was reviewing trail camera photos, the station's temperature dropped, not gradually. One moment the air was comfortable, maybe 65 degrees, and the next it was cold enough that I could see my breath. I stood and checked the wood stove. No fire, which was normal. I checked the propane heater mounted on the western wall. Off. I turned it on and adjusted the thermostat. The heater ignited, but the temperature didn't rise. I pulled on my jacket and sat back down. The cold intensified over the next 10 minutes until I was shivering. I could hear my teeth chattering. The computer screen fogged with condensation. At 12:20, the temperature normalized. Within 30 seconds, the station felt comfortable again. I took off my jacket and logged it. 00 to 0020. Sudden temperature drop estimated 30 degrees. Propane heater ineffective. Temperature restored without explanation. At 1:30, I walked the perimeter. The forest was absolutely silent. No wind, no animal sounds, no insects. I counted markers. 19. 13 minutes. When I returned to the station, the northern door bolt was open again. I stared at it. I'd checked it at the start of the shift. It had been closed. Now it was open, the bolt fully retracted, the padlock still in place. I logged it. 0146, northern door bolt found open, door checked and confirmed closed at shift start. Bolt opened during shift without intervention. Amendment 23 said not to look directly at the northern door between 2 and 4 a.m. It was 1:46. I had 14 minutes before the restriction took effect. I approached the door carefully. The bolt was a heavy steel bar, maybe 8 inches long, that slid through brackets on the door and the frame. Opening it required deliberate force. It couldn't slide open by accident. I grasped the bolt and pushed it closed. It moved smoothly and locked into place with a solid click. I checked the padlock. Secure. I returned to the desk and didn't look at the door again. At 2 a.m., I opened the western blinds and checked the trail cameras. Photos came through normally. At 2:06, summit loop triggered. 2 subjects, human-shaped, wearing ranger uniforms, standing in the center of the trail facing the camera. Different location, same configuration as the River Bend photos. I flagged it and logged it. At 2:30, I heard a sound from the northern door. A soft scraping like fingernails on wood. Then a knock. 3 measured knocks. I kept my eyes on the computer screen. I didn't turn around. The knocking continued. 3 knocks, pause, 3 knocks, pause. It went on for 5 minutes, then stopped. I logged it. 02:30 to 02:35, knocking sounds from northern door, pattern of 3 knocks repeated. Did not investigate per Amendment 23. At 4:15, I walked the perimeter. 19 markers, 16 minutes. At 6 a.m., I closed out the shift and called Warden Moss on the satellite phone. The subjects from River Bend appeared at Summit Loop last night, I said. Same uniforms, same configuration, and the northern door bolt keeps opening on its own. I saw your email with the screenshot, she said. I've sent it to our technical team. They think it's a camera malfunction, but they want to run diagnostics. I asked about the bolt. I'll send someone to replace the entire door assembly next week, she said. In the meantime, just keep it closed when you check it before and after the restricted window. I asked what I should do if it opens during the window. Nothing, she said. Don't look at it. Don't interact with it. Just log it and continue your shift. She hung up. The next 3 nights followed the same pattern. Temperature drops at midnight. The northern door bolt opening sometime between 1 and 2 a.m. Knocking from the northern door between 2:30 and 3 a.m. Trail camera photos showing the two uniformed figures at different locations each night. North Trail, Western Boundary, Eastern Approach. On the fourth night, the figures appeared at cabin rear. I checked the photo at 2:11 a.m. Two subjects in ranger uniforms standing 10 feet from the cabin's back door facing the camera. The cabin door was visible in the frame behind them, closed and dark. I was inside the station, approximately 15 yards from the cabin. Between me and the cabin, open ground, no cover. I called Moss. "They're at the cabin," I said. "I don't see anything on the cabin rear feed," she said. "Are you sure?" I described the photo. "Listen carefully," she said. "Do not go to the cabin. Do not look out the windows toward the cabin. Stay in the station until the end of your shift. When you go to the cabin at 6 a.m., I want you to keep me on the satellite phone the entire time. Do you understand?" I said yes. "If you see anything unusual between now and then, call me immediately," she said. I stayed at the desk for the rest of the shift. At 3 a.m., I heard footsteps outside, not circling the station this time, walking back and forth between the station and the cabin. I didn't look. At 4:15, I walked the perimeter. The yellow trail took me around the eastern side of the station, past the cabin. I kept my eyes on the trail markers and didn't look toward the cabin. 19 markers, 14 minutes. At 6 a.m., I called Moss and put the satellite phone on speaker. "I'm closing out now," I said. "I'm going to walk to the cabin." "I'm here," she said. "Talk to me the whole way." I locked the station and stepped onto the porch. The clearing was empty. Dawn light filtered through the trees. I walked toward the cabin, watching the ground ahead of me. "Anything?" Moss asked. "No," I said. "It looks normal." I reached the cabin door. It was closed and locked, exactly as I'd left it. I unlocked it and pushed it open. The interior was wrong, not dramatically, but small things were different. The bed was made, which I hadn't done. The table was clean, which I'd left cluttered with dishes. The wood stove was cold, but there was fresh ash in the firebox. "The cabin's been rearranged," I said. "Are you inside?" Moss asked. "Yes." "Look around carefully. Tell me everything you see." I walked through the cabin. The bed was made with hospital corners, tight and precise. The dishes I'd left on the table were washed and stacked neatly on the counter. The wood stove's ash was fine and gray, like it had burned very hot for a long time. I opened the bathroom door. The towels were folded and hung evenly on the rack. "Someone cleaned the cabin," I said. "Was anything taken?" Moss asked. I checked my belongings. Clothes, toiletries, books, laptop, everything was there. "No," I said. "Nothing's missing, it's just organized." "Lock yourself in," Moss said. "I'm sending rangers to the station now. They'll be there in 90 minutes. Don't open the door for anyone until they knock and identify themselves by name. Rangers Hale and Courtney. Repeat that." "Hale and Courtney," I said. "Good. Stay on the phone until they arrive." I locked the cabin door and sat on the bed. Moss stayed on the line, occasionally asking if I was okay. I said yes each time. At 7:30, I heard a vehicle on the access road. At 7:45, someone knocked on the cabin door. "This is Ranger Hale and Ranger Courtney," a female voice said. I opened the door. Hale was there, the same woman who'd handed me the keys 5 weeks ago. With her was a younger man in a ranger uniform. "Warden Moss sent us," Hale said. "She said you had visitors." I told them what I'd found. They searched the cabin methodically, checking under the bed, in the closet, in the bathroom. Courtney examined the wood stove ash and took a sample in a plastic bag. "Nothing here now," Hale said. "But someone was definitely inside. The ash is from pine, which you don't burn. The pine around here doesn't season well enough for wood stoves." I asked how someone got in. She checked the door and windows. No signs of forced entry. "You keep the key with you?" I showed her the key ring, all 6 keys present. Then they had another key, she said. She radioed Moss and gave her report. Moss told them to rekey the cabin lock and install a deadbolt that only I would have the key for. They worked for 2 hours, removing the old lock set, installing a new knob and a heavy deadbolt. Hale handed me 2 new keys. No one else has copies, she said. Not even Moss. If someone gets in again, it's not through the door. They left at 10 a.m. I tried to sleep but couldn't. At noon, I gave up and made coffee. At 3 p.m., I forced myself to eat something. At 7 p.m., I dressed for my shift. At 8 p.m., I opened the station and found another amendment taped to the desk. Amendment to Northern Station Standing Orders, effective immediately 26. The cabin should remain locked at all times when you are not inside. Do not leave windows open or unlocked. Verify all locks before starting your shift. 27. If you discover evidence that someone has entered the cabin or station during your off hours, and conduct a thorough inventory of all equipment and personal belongings before continuing your shift. Report any missing items immediately. 28. During the month of June, daylight hours will extend later into your shift period. Do not alter your shift schedule based on available daylight. The shift runs from 8 p.m. to 6 a.m. regardless of sunrise and sunset times. 29. If you observe a deer that appears to be injured, moving abnormally, or displaying unusual behavior outside the specific behavior described in Order 4, maintain your distance and log the observation. Do not attempt to provide aid or call wildlife authorities without first consulting the main office. 30. Between 4 a.m. and 6 a.m., check the salt threshold lines every 30 minutes. Repair any breaks immediately. This is the highest priority task during this window. I read the amendments 3 times, then tape them into the manual. At 10 p.m., I walked the perimeter. 19 markers, 13 minutes. Everything normal. At midnight, the temperature dropped again. I put on my jacket and waited. 20 minutes later, the temperature normalized. At 1:30, I walked the perimeter. The extra marker, the 21st one that had appeared off trail weeks ago, was gone. The tree it had been nailed to stood empty. 19 markers on the trail as it should be. 14 minutes. At 2 a.m., I checked the trail cameras. Photos came through cleanly, nothing flagged. At 2:40, I heard a sound outside the station. Not footsteps, not knocking. A sustained scraping noise like something heavy being dragged across gravel. I listened. The scraping circled the station slowly, taking several minutes to complete one circuit. It stopped at the southern door. The door handle rattled. I stood and faced the door, flashlight in hand. The handle rattled again, then went still. The salt line was intact. At 4:15, I walked the perimeter. 19 markers, 13 minutes. When I returned, the northern door bolt was open. I approached the door, checked that it was still closed despite the bolt, then slid the bolt shut. At 4:30, I checked the salt threshold lines, both intact. At 5 a.m., I checked them again. The southern threshold line was broken, a gap 4 inches wide. I refilled it. At 5:30, I checked them again, both intact. At 6 a.m., I closed out the shift. The pattern continued for the next week. Every night, the same sequence. Temperature drop at midnight, northern door bolt opening between 1 and 2. Sounds at the door between 2:30 and 3. Salt line breaks between 4 and 6. On the 8th night, something changed. At 1:30, when I walked the perimeter, I counted 20 markers. I stopped at marker 19 and looked ahead. Marker 20 was nailed to a tree at the edge of the clearing, directly in line with the trail's normal route. It looked identical to the others. Yellow reflective diamond, standard mounting. I continued walking. Marker 20, then I should be back at the station. But the trail continued past marker 20 into the trees. I followed it. 20 yards into the trees, I found marker 21, then marker 22. I stopped and looked back. I could still see the station lights through the trees. I was maybe 60 yards away, well beyond the normal perimeter. I turned around and walked back the way I'd come. When I reached marker 19, I looked for the trail that should lead back to the station. It was gone. The trees were too thick, the underbrush too dense. I couldn't see the normal route. I followed the markers backward. 18, 17, 16. At marker 15, I stopped. This wasn't the yellow trail. The terrain was wrong. Too steep, too rocky. The yellow trail was flat, easy walking. This trail was climbing. I checked my watch. 19 minutes had passed since I started the walk. I turned around and looked for the station lights. Nothing. The trees blocked everything. I continued backward along the markers, 14, 13, 12. At marker 11, the trail leveled out. At marker 8, I recognized the boulder with surveyor's marks. At marker 1, I saw the clearing. I walked back to the station, 24 minutes total. I logged it, ZO 154, perimeter walk 2 complete. 22 markers counted, trail extended beyond normal boundary. Returned via backward navigation. Duration 24 minutes. I radioed the main office on channel 4. Main office, Northern Station. I need to report a serious discrepancy on the perimeter walk. Over. No response. I tried again. Main office, Northern Station, do you copy? Over. Static. I switched to channel 9. Main office, this is Northern Station on emergency channel. Do you copy? Over. A voice crackled back, not the usual bored male voice, someone else. Northern, we copy. What's your emergency? Over. The yellow trail has changed. It extended beyond the normal boundary. I counted 22 markers instead of 19. Over. A pause. Northern, confirm you completed your walk and returned safely to the station. Over. Confirmed. I'm in the station now. Over. Copy. Log the discrepancy. Do not attempt another perimeter walk until we send someone to inspect the trail. Continue other assigned duties. Over. Copy. What about the 4:15 walk? Over. Skip it. We'll send someone at first light. Over. Roger. Northern clear. I hung up the handset and sat at the desk. It was 2 a.m. I opened the western blinds and checked the trail cameras. Every camera showed the same thing. 2 figures in ranger uniforms standing directly in front of each camera, facing the lens. Summit Loop, North Trail, River Bend, Eastern Approach, Western Boundary, Cabin Rear. All 6 cameras, all 6 locations. Same timestamp, 2:01 a.m. I grabbed the satellite phone and called Moss. All 6 cameras triggered simultaneously at 2:01, I said. Same subjects at every location. I'm looking at the feeds now, Moss said. I don't see anything. They're on my screen, I said. Screenshot all of them and send them tomorrow, she said. In the meantime, I want you to shut down the computer. Don't look at the trail camera feeds for the rest of your shift. I asked what I should do about monitoring. You can't monitor what's not real, she said. Those images are glitches. Shut it down. I shut down the computer. The station felt smaller without the screen's glow. I sat in the silence and waited. At 2:30, the knocking started at the northern door. 3 knocks. Pause, 3 knocks. It continued for 10 minutes, then stopped. At 3 a.m., I heard my name. Hey! The voice came from the northern door. Male, young, familiar. Hey, I know you're in there. Order 9. If you hear your own name spoken aloud, do not respond. I logged it and didn't turn around. Come on, open the door. The voice was closer now, directly behind me. I kept my eyes on the logbook. Open the door. I felt breath on the back of my neck. I stood slowly, keeping my eyes forward, and walked to the southern door. I stepped outside onto the porch and closed the door behind me. The night air was cold and clean. I walked to the edge of the clearing and stood there looking at the trees. 5 minutes passed. 10. At 3:20, I went back inside. The station was empty, no voice, no breath. Just the quiet hum of the radio array. I logged it. 03 DAWS vocalization inside station, male voice, used occupant's name. Exited station per safety protocol, returned at 03:20. At 4:30, I checked the salt threshold lines. Southern line broken, gap 6 inches. I repaired it. At 5 a.m., I checked them again. Both intact. At 5:30, I checked them again. Northern line broken, gap 8 inches. I repaired it. At 6 a.m., I called the main office for the closing check. The same voice I'd spoken to at 1:30 answered. "Rangers are on the way," he said. "They'll check the trail and the cameras. Stay at the cabin until they arrive. Don't go back into the station." "Copy," I said. I locked the station and walked to the cabin. I locked myself inside with the new deadbolt and sat on the bed with the satellite phone. Hale and Courtney arrived at 7:30. They knocked and identified themselves. I let them in. "Warden Moss briefed us," Hale said. "We're going to walk the yellow trail and document what we find. We'll also check all 6 cameras. Should take about 4 hours." They left. I tried to sleep and failed. At 11:30, they returned. "The trail has 19 markers," Hale said. "We walked it twice, counted each time, measured the distances between markers. Everything's normal." I asked about the extra markers I'd seen. "Not there now," she said. "The cameras are fine, too. We checked the mounting hardware, the power supplies, the SD cards. Everything's functioning correctly." Courtney handed me a folded piece of paper. "Warden Moss wants you to have this. New protocols for when things get unstable." I unfolded the paper. "Emergency protocols for Northern Station. Use only during documented instability events. Emergency Protocol 1. If perimeter walk duration exceeds 20 minutes, or if marker count exceeds 19, abort the walk immediately. Return to the station using the most direct route, even if this means leaving the trail. Once inside, do not attempt another perimeter walk until the next scheduled time. Emergency Protocol 2. If the station interior temperature drops below 40 degrees Fahrenheit, or if you can see your breath indoors, light the wood stove immediately. Keep the fire burning until the temperature normalizes. Do not leave the station during temperature events. Emergency Protocol 3. If you hear vocalizations that include your name, a family member's name, or any phrase you've spoken in the past 48 hours. Exit the station through the southern door and stand at the edge of the clearing for a minimum of 10 minutes. Do not re-enter until the 10-minute period has elapsed. Emergency Protocol 4. If salt threshold lines break more than twice in a single shift, reinforce them with double thickness and add salt lines to the windowsills. Check all lines every 15 minutes until the end of shift. Emergency Protocol 5. If any door or window opens on its own, or if any bolt or lock changes position without your intervention, do not attempt to secure it immediately. Wait 5 minutes, then secure it while speaking the following phrase aloud. "I maintain this station by authority granted." Repeat the phrase 3 times while securing the door or window. I read through the protocols twice while Hale watched. "You've had all of these happen?" she asked. I told her yes. "Then things are getting worse," she said. "Moss knows it. She's trying to decide whether to close the Northern Station for the season." I asked why she didn't just close it now. "Because this is the best season we've ever had for fire watch," Hale said. "Dry conditions, high winds. We need eyes up here, but if the station becomes unworkable, she'll pull you out." They left at noon. I slept for 3 hours, woke, made food I barely touched, and dressed for my shift at 7:30. At 8 p.m., I opened the station. The northern door bolt was open. I walked to it, placed my hand on the bolt, and spoke. "I maintain this station by authority granted. I maintain this station by authority granted. I maintain this station by authority granted. I pushed the bolt closed. It locked smoothly. I checked the salt level, 70%. I checked the threshold lines, intact. I inventoried the supply locker, everything present. At 10 p.m., I walked the perimeter. I counted markers carefully as I went. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. At marker 6, I paused. There was something on the trail ahead of me. A shape, low and dark, moving slowly from left to right. I raised my flashlight. A deer. Young doe, maybe 80 pounds. She was walking sideways across the trail, perpendicular to my position. Not forward, not backward, sideways. Her legs moved in a strange, crabwise shuffle that looked anatomically wrong. I stopped walking and kept the flashlight on her. She continued her sideways movement until she reached the edge of the trail, then stepped into the underbrush and disappeared. I waited 1 minute, then continued the walk, counted markers 7 through 19. 13 minutes total. I logged it. 22:13, perimeter walk 1 complete. 19 markers. 1 deer observed exhibiting lateral locomotion at marker 6, did not approach. Deer exited trail westbound. At 11 p.m., I closed the western blinds. At midnight, the temperature dropped. I could see my breath within 30 seconds. I crossed to the wood stove and opened the firebox. Inside was a stack of kindling and split wood already arranged. I hadn't put it there. I struck a match and lit the kindling. The fire caught quickly and began to spread. Within 5 minutes, the wood stove was radiating heat. The temperature in the station started to rise. At 12:20, the cold broke. The station returned to normal temperature. I let the fire burn down to coals and closed the flue. At 1:30, I walked the perimeter. 19 markers, 14 minutes. At marker 11, I saw lights in the forest. They were approximately 200 yards northwest of the trail, visible through the trees. Not moving, not flickering. Just steady white light like high-powered flashlights aimed at the ground. I counted 3 distinct light sources arranged in a triangular pattern. I noted the location and continued my walk. Back at the station, I checked the compass on the desk and calculated the bearing. 315 degrees from the station. I logged it. 0147, 3 stationary lights observed from Yellow Trail, bearing 315 degrees, estimated distance 200 yards. Lights remained stationary for duration of observation. At 2 a.m., I opened the western blinds. I didn't turn on the computer. Moss had told me not to look at the trail camera feeds. I sat at the desk and waited. At 2:30, the knocking started at the northern door. 3 knocks, pause, 3 knocks. It continued for 20 minutes this time. I logged the duration. At 3 a.m., I heard footsteps inside the station, not outside, inside. They started near the southern door and walked slowly toward the desk. I sat absolutely still, eyes on the logbook, hands flat on the desk surface. The footsteps stopped directly behind my chair. I felt pressure on the back of the chair like someone leaning their weight against it. Order 3 of the emergency protocols. Exit the station and stand at the edge of the clearing for 10 minutes. I stood slowly and walked to the southern door, not looking back. I stepped outside and closed the door. The night was quiet and clear. I walked to the clearing's edge and checked my watch. 3:02 a.m. I counted the minutes. At 3:12, I returned to the station. The interior was empty. No footsteps, no pressure. I logged it. 0302. Footsteps inside station, origin unknown. Exited per emergency protocol 3, returned at 0312. At 4:15, I walked the perimeter, 19 markers, 12 minutes. At 4:30, I checked the salt threshold lines. Southern line broken gap 5 inches, northern line broken gap 7 inches. I repaired both, then added second lines on top of the first, making them double thickness. I added new lines to all 4 window sills. At 5 a.m. I checked them again, all intact. At 5:30 I checked them again. Southern threshold broken, gap 3 inches. I repaired it. At 6 a.m. I closed out the shift and radioed the main office. I reported the lights, the footsteps, the salt line breaks. The voice acknowledged and said Warden Moss would call me. She called at 2 in the afternoon. "I want you to take your day off," she said. "You're scheduled for 1 day per month. Take it tomorrow. Drive into Ridley, get a hotel room, sleep in a real bed. Come back the day after." I told her I was fine. "It's not optional," she said. "You've been up here for 6 weeks without a break. You need distance from the station, 1 day away, then you come back. Understood?" I said yes. The next morning I packed a small bag and drove to Ridley. I checked into the town's only motel, a 10-room place with cracked parking lot asphalt and a flickering vacancy sign. The room smelled like old carpet and bleach. I lay on the bed and stared at the ceiling. I couldn't sleep. Every small sound, footsteps in the hall, doors closing, water running in adjacent rooms made me tense. At 3 in the afternoon, I gave up and went to the diner. The waitress was the same woman from the general store. She brought coffee without asking. "Day off?" she said. I said yes. "You look like you need more than 1 day," she said. I asked if previous rangers had taken days off. Some did. Most didn't last long enough to need them. She refilled my cup. Hale took 1 day off in 7 months, came down here, sat in this same booth, drank coffee for 6 hours, then went back up. She told me the station gets inside your head if you're not careful. I asked what she meant. "Starts to feel like the only real place," she said. "Like everything else is just waiting. You ever feel that way?" I told her sometimes. She nodded. Hale said the same thing. She quit 2 weeks later. I ate a sandwich I didn't want and went back to the motel. At 8 p.m., I lay in bed and wondered who was at the station. Moss had said I was the only ranger assigned to the northern station. If I wasn't there, was anyone monitoring it? I slept badly, waking every hour to check the time. At 6 a.m., I gave up, checked out of the motel, and drove back to the station. When I pulled into the clearing, something was wrong. The station door was open, not just unlocked, standing open, the interior dark. I parked and approached slowly. The southern door hung on its hinges, moving slightly in the morning breeze. I stepped onto the porch and looked inside. The desk was overturned. The filing cabinets were open, papers scattered across the floor. The radio array was offline, handsets missing from their cradles. The logbook lay open on the floor, pages torn out. I entered carefully and looked around. The supply locker door hung open, contents spilled. The salt bucket was on its side, salt spread across the floor. The northern door was wide open, showing the trees beyond. The salt threshold lines were gone, scraped away completely. I backed out of the station and called Moss on the satellite phone. "The station's been destroyed," I said. "Door open, equipment damaged, salt everywhere. Someone was inside." "Get out of there," she said. "Go to the cabin and lock yourself in. I'm sending rangers now. Don't go back in the station." I walked to the cabin. The door was locked exactly as I'd left it. Inside, everything was normal. I sat on the bed with the phone and waited. Hale and Courtney arrived 40 minutes later with Warden Moss. All 3 were armed. They searched the station while I waited in the cabin. After 20 minutes, Moss came to get me. "Someone was definitely in there," she said. "But they're gone now. We need to know what's missing." I walked through the station with her. The radio base unit was still mounted, but 2 of the 3 handsets were gone. The computer was intact but offline. The logbook was missing 12 pages. The supply locker was missing 4 battery packs, 2 flashlights, and 1 road flare. "Could have been hikers," Courtney said. "Lost, desperate, broke in looking for supplies." Hale shook her head. "Hikers wouldn't tear out logbook pages." Hikers wouldn't dump the salt and scrape the threshold lines clean. Moss examined the northern door. The bolt housing was damaged, the metal bent outward. This door was forced from the inside, she said. Someone or something pushed hard enough to break the bolt mechanism. I asked if we should call the police. And tell them what, Moss said. That something broke out of a locked room? They'll think we're insane. She looked at me. I want you to take another 2 days off. We'll repair the damage, replace the equipment, and rekey the station. When you come back, it'll be like nothing happened. I told her I'd rather start work tonight. That's not possible, she said. The station needs repairs. 2 days minimum. Go back to Ridley. I drove back to Ridley and checked into the motel again. The same room, the same cracked parking lot. I lay on the bed and tried to make sense of what had happened. Someone had forced the northern door open from the inside. But I'd locked the station when I left for my day off. Both doors were secured, the windows latched. If someone broke in through the southern door, why would they force open the northern door from inside, unless they weren't breaking in? Unless they were breaking out. I slept in fragments, waking every time a car passed on the road outside. At dawn on the second day, my phone rang. The motel room phone, not my cell. I picked up. It's Moss, the voice said. The station is ready. You can come back tonight. I said, okay. One more thing, Moss said. We found something during the repairs. A journal hidden in the wall cavity behind the northern door. It belonged to a previous ranger. I think you should read it before you start your shift. She told me she'd leave it on the desk. I drove back to the station that afternoon. The clearing looked normal. The station looked normal. The southern door was closed and locked. I used my key and went inside. The damage was repaired. New radio handsets in their cradles, fresh logbook on the desk, supply locker restocked. The salt bucket was full, threshold lines intact. On the desk, a spiral-bound notebook with a cracked leather cover. I opened it. The first entry was dated 8 months ago. Day 1. Arrived at the northern station. Warden Moss gave me the standing orders. 14 rules. I asked about the northern door. She said it's damaged and scheduled for repair. I asked about the salt. She said rodents. I flipped through the entries. The handwriting was neat and controlled for the first few weeks, then became rushed and jagged. Week 3. The trail extended again last night, 24 markers. I followed them for 30 minutes before I turned back. When I reached the station, only 12 minutes had passed on my watch. Week 5. The figures in the cameras are always there now. Every location, every night, same uniforms, same postures. Moss says they're glitches, but glitches don't walk. I saw one of them walk past the western window during the restricted hours. I didn't look at it directly, but I saw it move. Week 7. Something is living in the walls. I hear it moving between the interior and exterior clapboards. Scratching, shuffling. It moves in patterns, circles at midnight. Lines at 2 a.m., spirals at 4 a.m. Week 9. The northern door opened itself last night. I heard the bolt slide open, then the door swung wide. I could see the forest beyond. There was something standing in the trees. Tall, upright, not moving. I closed the door and secured it with duct tape. The tape was shredded by morning. Week 11. I can't leave. Moss says I can take a day off, but I know what will happen if I leave. It will get out. The thing behind the northern door. It's been trying to leave for years. Every ranger who's worked here has been holding it back. If I leave, there's no one to maintain the salt lines, no one to keep the protocols. It will walk out. Week 12. I made a mistake tonight. I looked directly at the northern door during the restricted hours. I saw what's been knocking. It's wearing a ranger uniform, my uniform, same patches, same name tag. It smiled at me. I can't stop thinking about that smile. The entries stopped there. The rest of the pages were blank. I closed the journal and set it on the desk. I sat there for 10 minutes, staring at the northern door. The bolt was closed. The door was secured. At 8 p.m., I started my shift. The radio check went normally. Equipment inventory normal. Salt levels at 95%. I checked the threshold lines, checked the windows, checked both doors. At 10 p.m., I walked the perimeter. 19 markers, 13 minutes, no anomalies. At 11 p.m., I closed the western blinds. At midnight, the temperature dropped. I lit the wood stove and waited. The cold broke at 12:20. At 1:30, I walked the perimeter. 19 markers. At marker 14, I saw the deer again. The same young doe from days before. She was walking sideways across the trail, that same crabwise shuffle. I watched until she disappeared into the trees, then continued the loop. 14 minutes. At 2 a.m., I opened the western blinds. I didn't turn on the computer. I sat at the desk with the journal in front of me and thought about the previous ranger. Someone had found the journal and hidden it behind the northern door. Moss, probably. She'd left it for me to find, knowing I'd eventually ask the right questions. At 2:30, the knocking started. 3 knocks, pause, 3 knocks. It continued for 30 minutes. At 3 a.m., I heard my name. "Hey!" The voice was directly behind me. I stood and walked to the southern door, following Emergency Protocol 3. I stepped outside and stood at the clearing's edge. While I was standing there, I heard the station's southern door close, not slam. Close softly, like someone pulling it shut from inside. I checked my watch. 3:04. I needed to stay outside until 3:13. At 3:10, I heard the northern door open. The squeak of hinges, then the sound of footsteps on the porch. The footsteps walked around the northern side of the station, moving toward the eastern side, toward the cabin. I stayed at the clearing's edge and didn't move. The footsteps stopped halfway between the station and the cabin. A minute passed, 2 minutes. At 3:13, I walked back to the southern door and opened it. The station was empty, the northern door was closed and bolted. The salt threshold lines were intact. I logged it. 0304, vocalization inside station, exited per protocol. Heard southern door close and northern door open during exterior wait period. Doors found secured upon return at 0313. At 4:15, I walked the perimeter. 19 markers, 12 minutes. At 4:30, I checked the salt threshold lines. Both broken gaps approximately 6 inches. I repaired them with double thickness. At 5 a.m., I checked them again. All intact. At 5:30, I checked them again. Northern threshold broken gap 4 inches. I repaired it. At 6 a.m., I closed out the shift and called Moss. "I read the journal," I said. "I thought you should," she said. I asked what happened to the ranger who wrote it. "He completed his contract in September," she said. "Moved to Colorado. He's fine." I asked if he was really fine. A pause. "He has trouble sleeping," she said. "Checks his doors obsessively. Keeps salt in his apartment. But he's alive and he's managing." I asked how many rangers had worked at the northern station. 7 in the last 6 years, she said. "You're the 8th. I asked how many completed their contracts. 3, she said, including the one who wrote the journal. I asked what happened to the others. 2 quit in the first month, 1 lasted 3 months, 1 had a breakdown and had to be hospitalized. She paused. "You're at 6 weeks. That's longer than most." I asked what was behind the northern door. "I don't know," she said. "Neither does anyone else. We just know that the protocols work. Follow them and you're safe. Break them and you're not." I asked why the station couldn't just be closed. "We've tried," she said, 3 times in the last 8 years. Each time, things started happening in other parts of the forest. Hikers went missing. Animals behaved aggressively. 2 people died in separate incidents within a month of closing the station. When we reopened it and maintained the protocols, the incident stopped. I asked what she thought it meant. "I think something is contained here," she said. "And the station, the protocols, the rangers, we're all part of the containment. Stop maintaining it and the containment fails." She hung up. I slept for 4 hours, then woke to the sound of rain on the cabin roof. I made coffee and sat at the table, staring at the trees through the window. The rain fell steadily, turning the clearing to mud. At 8 p.m. I started my shift. The rain continued, heavy and cold. I checked the equipment, the salt, the threshold lines. Everything normal. At 10 p.m., I walked the perimeter in the rain. My jacket kept most of it off, but my boots were soaked within minutes. I counted markers. 19. The trail was slick with mud. 15 minutes. At 11 p.m., I closed the western blinds. At midnight, the temperature dropped. I lit the wood stove. The cold broke at 12:15. At 1:30, I walked the perimeter again. The rain had stopped, but the trail was still muddy. I counted markers. At marker 17, I saw something that made me stop. Footprints in the mud, fresh, made within the last hour. Boot prints, same size as mine, walking in the opposite direction on the trail. I raised my flashlight and followed them with my eyes. The prints came from the direction of the station. They followed the yellow trail for 3 markers, then turned off the trail and headed west into the trees. I continued my walk. 19 markers, 16 minutes. Back at the station, I examined my own boots. The tread pattern matched the prints I'd seen on the trail. But I'd only walked the trail once tonight at 10 p.m. The prints I'd seen were fresh, made recently. I logged it. Arrow 146. Footprints observed on yellow trail, markers 15 through 17. Prints matched station occupant's boot tread. Prints appeared fresh, but station occupant did not make them during current shift. At 2 a.m., I opened the western blinds. The fire access road was dark and empty. I sat at the desk and reviewed the standing orders, reading through all 30 amendments. At 2:30, the knocking started. 3 knocks, pause, 3 knocks. It went on for 40 minutes this time, longer than ever before. At 3:15, I heard footsteps inside the station. They started at the southern door and walked toward the desk. I stood and headed for the door, following Emergency Protocol 3. The footsteps followed me. I walked faster. The footsteps matched my pace. I reached the southern door and pulled it open. The footsteps were directly behind me. I stepped outside and spun around. Nothing there. The station interior was empty. The footsteps had stopped. I stood in the clearing for 10 minutes, watching the station. Rain started to fall again, light and cold. At 3:25, I went back inside. The northern door bolt was open. I approached it slowly. The door was still closed, but the bolt was fully retracted. I placed my hand on it and spoke the phrase, "I maintain this station by authority granted. I maintain this station by authority granted. I maintain this station by authority granted." I pushed the bolt closed. It locked into place. I walked back to the desk and found the journal I'd been reading. I opened it to the blank pages and took a pen from the drawer. I started writing. Week 6. The footprints in the mud matched mine, but I didn't make them. Something is walking the perimeter in my boots. Something is maintaining the protocols when I'm not there. I don't know if that's better or worse than what I thought was happening. I wrote for 20 minutes, documenting everything I'd seen, everything I'd heard. When I finished, I closed the journal and put it back on the desk. At 4:15, I walked the perimeter. 19 markers, 13 minutes. The rain had stopped again. The sky was clearing, stars visible through breaks in the clouds. At 4:30, I checked the salt threshold lines. Southern line broken, gap 8 inches. Northern line broken, gap 6 inches. I repaired both with double thickness and added extra lines to the windowsills. At 5 a.m., I checked them again, all intact. At 5:30, I checked them again, all intact. At 6 a.m., I closed out the shift. The sky was light now, dawn breaking through the trees. I locked the station and walked to the cabin. Inside, I made breakfast and sat at the table, too tired to eat. I thought about the 3 rangers who'd completed their contracts. They'd lasted 6 months, 7 months, 8 months. They'd followed the protocols and survived and left. They were living their lives in other places, sleeping badly, checking their doors, keeping salt nearby. I thought about the 4 rangers who hadn't completed their contracts. Quit or broke or hospitalized. I thought about what Moss had said. The station contained something. The protocols maintained the containment. Stop maintaining it and people died. I was responsible for keeping whatever was behind the northern door from getting out. I lay down on the bed and closed my eyes. I woke at 3 in the afternoon to the sound of a vehicle on the access road. I looked out the cabin window and saw Moss's truck pulling into the clearing. She got out and walked to the cabin. I opened the door. "I need to talk to you," she said. I let her in. She sat at the table and folded her hands. "I've been reviewing your logs," she said. "You're documenting everything correctly. You're following the protocols exactly. You're doing better than most rangers at this point." I asked what the problem was. "The problem is that things are escalating," she said. "Faster than usual. The footprints, the extended trail, the voice inside the station, these are all things we've seen before, but not usually this early. Most rangers don't experience this level of activity until week 10 or 12. I asked what it meant. "It means the containment is under stress," she said. "Something's pushing harder than normal. I don't know why, but I need you to be prepared for things to get worse." She pulled a folded paper from her pocket and handed it to me. "Additional emergency protocols," she said. "Use these only if you experience a complete containment failure." Moss handed me the additional emergency protocols, their titles a stark warning of what was to come. Protocol 6, evacuation to the cabin if the northern door opens. Protocol 7, treat a figure wearing my uniform as hostile. Protocol 8, abandon perimeter walks if markers multiply. Protocol 9, evacuate after 5 salt line breaks. Protocol 10, immediate evacuation for sustained vocalizations, physical contact, or memory loss. "Has anyone ever had to use these?" I asked. "Once," Moss said, her voice grim. 4 years ago. The ranger evacuated during Protocol 6 and quit the next morning. The northern door was open, the salt lines gone, the logbook shredded. But nothing had left the station. She stood to leave. "I'm not trying to scare you, I'm trying to prepare you. The station can be repaired, you can't." That night, the escalation began. During my 1:30 a.m. perimeter walk, I found it standing on the trail at marker 9. A figure in a ranger uniform, my uniform. It waved, a perfect mimic of my own gesture. I retreated immediately, following Protocol 7, and logged the encounter. The knocking started at 2:30, first on the northern door, then, bizarrely, on the southern door where no one stood. I heard footsteps circle the station and head toward the cabin. Following Moss's earlier instruction, I evacuated to the cabin and called her. Hale and Courtney arrived, and we walked the perimeter together. At marker 9, they found multiple sets of boot prints in the mud, all matching my tread. "It's learning your patterns," Hale noted grimly. The activity intensified. I started hearing my name spoken from inside the station. One night, while standing outside during a protocol-mandated evacuation, my personal cell phone, which had no service, rang with an unknown number. A voice, identical to the one calling my name, asked why I wouldn't talk to me. I hung up and discarded the phone. The salt line breaks accelerated one after another until I hit 5, triggering Protocol 9. I evacuated to the cabin and called Moss. 5 threshold breaks, I reported. I'm in the cabin. While I waited for support, I saw the station's southern door swing open. When Hale and Courtney arrived, we found the northern door breached. It stood wide open, the bolt sheared off, the threshold scraped clean. Pages had been torn from the logbook. Moss and Director Carver arrived at dawn. "This is the worst breach we've had in 4 years," Carver said, examining the destroyed bolt. "The containment is failing." Moss argued against closing the station, citing the deaths that had followed the last attempt. "It's getting stronger," she insisted. "It forced through steel, it's mimicking the Ranger, it's learning." Carver proposed a compromise. "We repair the door, reinforce it, and implement a 2-Ranger rotation. No more solo shifts. If it breaches again, we close the station and deal with the consequences." I agreed to stay. 2 days later, I met my new partner, Walker, a former military ranger. "Moss briefed me," he said, his expression neutral. "I think we're babysitting something that should probably be burned to the ground, but we keep it contained." We began our 12-hour shifts together. The nightly ritual of anomalies continued. Temperature drops at midnight, knocking at 2:30, footsteps at 3, and the northern door bolt sliding open on its own. Each time we would approach it together, and I would repeat the verbal ritual. "I maintain this station by authority granted." The bolt would slide shut with a solid click, a temporary victory in an ongoing war. On our final walk of the night, we would check the salt lines, repairing the frequent breaches with double thickness. We were no longer just rangers maintaining a station. We were guards, 2 against 1, holding the line until our relief arrived. The station remembered, and it was testing our resolve, waiting for the moment we would falter. But as long as we were there, following the protocols, the door would hold. I drove back to the station that afternoon. When I pulled into the clearing, there was another truck parked near the cabin. A man in a ranger uniform stood on the station porch. He was tall, maybe 40, with short dark hair and a neutral expression. "Walker," he said, extending his hand. I shook it and told him my name. "Moss briefed me," he said. "Showed me the protocols, the amendments, the emergency procedures. Told me about the door and the figure that looks like you." I asked what he thought. "I think we're babysitting something that should probably be burned to the ground," he said. "But I also think Moss is right. Close the station and it gets loose, so we keep it contained." We went inside and he showed me what they'd done. The northern door had a new bolt, heavy steel, mounted with 6-inch screws. A metal plate covered the area where the old bolt had been sheared. The hinges were replaced with industrial-grade hardware. Motion sensors were mounted in all 4 corners of the ceiling, their small red lights blinking steadily. "Anything moves in here when we're both outside, those sensors trip and Moss gets an alert," Walker said. "She'll call immediately." The salt bucket was full. The threshold lines were fresh. The supply locker was restocked. Everything looked ready. At 8 p.m., we started the shift together. Walker handled the radio check while I inventoried the equipment, everything nominal. At 10 p.m., we walked the perimeter together. Walker in front, me behind, both counting markers. 19 markers, 13 minutes, no anomalies. "You think it'll try something tonight?" Walker asked. I said I didn't know. At 11 p.m., I closed the western blinds while Walker checked the doors. At midnight, the temperature dropped. We both felt it. Walker moved to the wood stove and started the fire without being told. The cold broke at 12:28. "That happen every night?" Walker asked. I said yes. Around midnight. At 1:30, we walked the perimeter together, 19 markers, 14 minutes. At marker 9, Walker stopped and examined the trail. "Boot prints," he said, fresh." I looked. The same tread pattern as mine. Multiple overlapping sets. "It's been walking the trail," I said. We continued the loop. At marker 13, we heard footsteps in the trees to our left. Walker put his hand on his sidearm. The footsteps paralleled us for 4 markers, then stopped. Back at the station, Walker logged the observations while I checked the salt threshold lines. All intact. At 2:30, the knocking started at the northern door. Walker stood and crossed to the door, listening. 3 knocks, then pause, he said. Very precise. It does that every night, I said. How long? Anywhere from 10 minutes to an hour. The knocking continued. Walker positioned himself at the desk where he could watch the northern door. At 3:15, the knocking stopped. That's when it usually moves to other activities, I said. At 3:20, we heard footsteps on the porch. Walker moved to the southern door and looked through the window. He shook his head. Nothing there. The footsteps circled the station. When they reached the northern side, they stopped. We waited. 1 minute, 2 minutes, 3. Then the northern door bolt began to slide open. We both watched it move, the steel bar retracting smoothly from its bracket despite no visible force acting on it. The bolt slid completely open and stopped. Walker drew his sidearm. Should we secure it? I said yes, but we needed to use the phrase. We approached the door together. I placed my hand on the bolt and spoke. I maintain this station by authority granted. I maintain this station by authority granted. I maintain this station by authority granted. I pushed the bolt closed. It locked into place. The door remained shut. Walker holstered his weapon. That's new? I told him about the previous ranger, about the journal, about how the bolt had been opening for months. At 4:15, we walked the perimeter together. 19 markers, 15 minutes. At marker 6, we saw the deer. The young doe walking sideways across the trail, that unnatural crabwise movement. Walker stopped and stared. What the hell is that? Order 4, I said. Deer moving in reverse, except this one moves sideways. We watched until it disappeared into the trees. At 4:30, we checked the salt threshold lines. Southern line broken, gap 8 inches, northern line intact. We repaired the southern line with double thickness. At 5 a.m. we checked again, both intact. At 5:30 we checked again, both intact. At 6 a.m. we closed out the shift. Walker radioed the main office while I updated the logbook. Chen acknowledged our closing check and asked about anomalies. Walker gave her a summary. You handled yourself well, I told Walker when he hung up. I've seen some strange things, he said, but nothing like this. See you at 8 tonight. He left. I went to the cabin and slept. The pattern continued for the next week. Walker and I worked together, maintaining the protocols, documenting the anomalies. The temperature drops at midnight, the knocking at 2:30, the footsteps at 3. The northern door bolt sliding open at 3:20. The salt line breaks between 4:30 and 5:30. On the 8th night, the trail betrayed us. During our perimeter walk, Walker and I counted 21 markers instead of 19. Protocol 1 demanded we abort immediately. We turned back, but the trail resisted our return. Trees blurred together, markers seemed to multiply, and despite heading directly toward the station, we walked in circles for 8 minutes before breaking through the underbrush to reach the clearing. Inside, Walker radioed the main office as I logged the anomaly. At 2:30 a.m., the familiar knocking began, lasting an hour this time. When it stopped, footsteps circled the station 4 times before stopping at the southern door. Then came my own voice from outside, pleading to be let in. Walker peered through the window. Nothing was there. At 4:30 a.m., we discovered salt lines broken across both thresholds and western windows. After repairs, another break appeared at 5 a.m., 5 total breaches triggering Protocol 9. We evacuated to the cabin, Walker creating a salt perimeter while I called Moss. Through the cabin window, we watched the station's southern door swing open at 5:45 a.m. By sunrise, 8 armed rangers arrived. Inside, the northern door hung open, its bolt destroyed, motion sensors torn from the ceiling. Written in ash on the wall, "I maintain this station." "It's claiming authority," Director Carver observed. "It can't leave while we maintain the protocols," I explained, the realization dawning. "We're not documenting its behavior, we're binding it. Every protocol reinforces containment." After heated discussion, Carver agreed to formalize the northern station as a permanent 2-ranger posting with rotating assignments. I committed to 1 more month before transferring out. As Walker and I resumed our duties, the patterns continued. Temperature drops, knocking, footsteps, voices. But now I understood. We weren't just rangers maintaining a station. We were guards, keeping something contained behind a door that could never be left unattended. On my final night 3 weeks later, I walked the perimeter with Walker at 1:30 a.m. At marker 9, we saw the figure. It was standing in the center of the trail, wearing my uniform, facing us. The moonlight was bright enough that I could see details. The uniform was perfect, the patches were correct, the stance was mine. But the face was wrong, not quite right, like a photograph slightly out of focus. Close enough to be me, but not quite. "I maintain this station," it said in my voice. "You can leave now. I'll handle the protocols." Walker raised his weapon. "Get back." The figure smiled. My smile, but not quite. "You don't need to be here anymore. I've learned everything. I can do the perimeter walks. I can maintain the salt lines. I can keep the door closed. I'm you. Better than you." "No," I said. "You're not." "I am," it insisted. "I'm the perfect ranger. I never sleep. I never make mistakes. I never want to leave. Let me do the job." "That's not how this works," I said. "The protocols require human rangers. Humans with authority granted. You can mimic us, but you can't replace us." The figure's smile faded. "You'll leave eventually. Everyone does. And when there's no one left, I'll still be here. I'll walk the trails, I'll maintain the lines, I'll keep the station, and the door will stay closed because I'll hold it closed." "Or," Walker said, "the door will open because you'll open it. That's what you really want. You want us gone so there's no one to stop you." The figure looked at Walker, then back at me. "I just want to do my job." "Your job is to stay behind that door," I said. "Our job is to make sure you do." The figure stood there for another moment, then turned and walked off the trail into the trees. We watched until it disappeared. We continued the perimeter walk, 19 markers, 16 minutes. The next morning I packed my belongings and said goodbye to Walker. He shook my hand on the cabin porch. "You did good," he said. "Not many people last 7 weeks here, let alone 11. I asked if he'd be okay with the new partner. "I'll manage," he said. "We all do." I drove away from the northern station at noon. In the rearview mirror, I watched the station and cabin shrink into the trees. Walker stood on the porch watching me go. 3 weeks later, I started at a new posting in a different state forest. Standard ranger work. Trail maintenance, visitor services, campfire safety, normal things. I still check my doors obsessively. I still keep salt in my apartment. I still wake up at 2:30 a.m. sometimes, expecting to hear 3 measured knocks. And sometimes, when I'm alone at night, I hear footsteps that match mine exactly. Last month, I received an envelope with no return address. Inside was a single sheet of paper with a message written in neat block letters. "The northern station has a new ranger. Her name is Martinez. She's on week 3. The protocols are being maintained. The door is holding. We thought you'd want to know." Below that, in different handwriting, "Thank you for your service. The station remembers." I keep the letter in my desk drawer. Some nights I take it out and read it. I think about Martinez walking the yellow trail at 1:30 a.m., counting 19 markers, maintaining the salt lines, speaking the phrase that holds the door closed. I think about all the rangers who will come after her. The ones who will last weeks or months, who will document the anomalies and follow the protocols and keep whatever's behind that door from getting out. I think about the figure wearing my uniform, walking the trails in my boots, waiting for the day when no one comes back to relieve the shift. And I know that day will never come, because there will always be someone willing to take the job. Someone who needs the money or wants the solitude or believes they can handle anything. Someone who will read the operations manual and say, yes, I can follow the protocols. Someone who will maintain the station by authority granted. Someone who will hold the line. Because that's what rangers do. We maintain. We hold. We keep the doors closed that should never be opened, even when the things behind those doors learn to look like us. Even when they learn to speak with our voices. Even when they learn to walk our trails and wait for us to leave. We maintain the station, and we never leave it unguarded.